Opposition leader Peter Dutton doubles down in response to reports of a request for a Russian base in Indonesia as Labor accuses him of a fabrication. I'm Patricia Karvelas, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in Canberra. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has denied he jumped the gun when he incorrectly suggested the Indonesian president had announced a request for Russian aircraft to be based in the country yesterday on this program. The government says Mr Dutton has verbaled the Indonesian president, but won't say whether it knew about the proposal before it was reported. I'll ask for more details from the Defence Minister Richard Marles in just a moment. The Coalition has announced a pledge to clear the backlog of residential approvals within a year of being elected, claiming they will expedite the process and change environmental assessments. Shadow Housing Minister Michael Super announced the plan in his debate with his ministerial counterpart Claire O'Neill at the National Press Club a little earlier. What does it mean in practice? I'll ask Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg later this hour. And both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader are on their way to Parramatta, preparing for the first ABC-hosted leaders' debate since 1993. How crucial could this moment be for both parties' campaigns ahead of the Easter break? I'll ask my panel. Let's start with our top story today, following the political fallout from a report claiming Russia had requested to station warplanes on an airbase in Indonesia. The Prime Minister said this morning the opposition leader overreached when he incorrectly told Afternoon Briefing yesterday that the Indonesian president had announced the request himself.
What we saw from Peter Dutton yesterday was an extraordinary overreach. He verbaled the President of Indonesia. He said very clearly, did the Prime Minister know about this before it was publicly announced by the President of Indonesia? Yesterday you saw the contrast between a government that's considered, that deals with our neighbours and deals internationally in a diplomatic way.
The opposition leader was undeterred by the criticism, pointing out Indonesia's increasingly close relationship with Russia, and says he was referring to a credible report quoting government sources.
The reference I made was obviously to what is a very credible military website, and that talked about government sources and of the Prabowo government sources. Now, it's obvious that Indonesia, well, it's a matter of fact that Indonesia has joined with Russia and with Brazil and with other countries, including China. They are closer together now. We don't know from the government exactly what happened because the government doesn't know. The government has reacted as the Prime Minister did, as I did yesterday, to the media reports, very credible media reports. And the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister found out about this from media reports.
I spoke to the Defence Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles a short time ago. Minister, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing.
Good to be talking to you, PK.
The Prime Minister said today that we shouldn't assume that the Janes report is correct. So I need to clarify, are you saying it's incorrect?
The Prime Minister has made his point in relation to that report.
Did we know about the Russian request for an Indonesian airbase?
Well, I'm not about to go into what we do or don't know in respect of what's happening in the region, because so much of that exists in the classified space. What's important here is that I was able to talk to my counterpart, Minister Jacqui, the Defence Minister of Indonesia, yesterday, and he made unequivocally clear that there is no prospect of Russian aircraft operating from Indonesia, and that's not a surprise to me because that's entirely consistent with the relationship that we've been building with Indonesia over the last 3 years. Our relationship has never been closer, and it's never been closer in respect of defence. Last year we signed a defence cooperation agreement with Indonesia. I signed it with my then counterpart, now President Prabowo, and you know, obviously Indonesia has a relationship with with other countries. It's been a non-aligned state for a long time. It has an existing relationship with Russia, but Indonesia is very clear about our national interest as we are clear about Indonesia's, and we are working very cooperatively together, walking into a shared future.
Okay, why can't the government tell us, though, if there was a request? I mean, that's in the public interest, isn't it?
We know that Russia is engaged in the region. We know that Russia wants things from time to time, but I'm not about to ventilate in public all that we know in relation to this. What matters here is the commitment that has been and the assurance that has been provided to us by Indonesia in a really timely manner that there is no prospect of Russian aircraft operating from Indonesia, and more to the point, the idea of that occurring is an idea that's false. But can I also make this point, PK? Just as I'm not going to ventilate that in the public domain because it matters that we handle these things in a sober and calm way. What we saw yesterday from the Leader of the Opposition was an act of recklessness. He literally put words in the mouth of the Indonesian president. I mean, he draws inspiration from one president. He seeks to put words in the mouth of another. He was shooting from the hip. I cannot overstate how dangerous that is in terms of managing our bilateral relations. And at a time when the world is in a volatile and uncertain situation, we need people who can govern our country in a calm and sober way and manage our relationships. And what this demonstrates is that Peter Dutton, frankly, does not have the temperament to be fit to be the Prime Minister of our nation.
No, well, that might be your view about the way he's handled it, but I think Australians are entitled...
Well, but I mean...
Australians are entitled to know...
He's literally gone and verbaled the President of Indonesia.
I know, which is why I challenged him when he was on the show, because I was aware that the Indonesian president had not confirmed such a thing. But whether a request was made is relevant for us to know, I still think. So the question, I suppose, is, do you expect Indonesia to inform you if requests are made? We have a very close relationship with Indonesia, and yesterday, in a very timely way, we had exactly the assurance that we would want to have from Indonesia in respect of their decisions as to whether or not other countries are operating and in what manner from their nation. And they made utterly clear to us, the Minister of Defence no less speaking to me yesterday, that there was no prospect of Russian aircraft operating from Indonesia, and that the reports of the possibility of that were false, and he made that abundantly clear to me. Now, that is what we needed to understand and to hear, and that was the assurance that we were very glad to receive. I mean, you're asking a question as to what requests Russia might have made in respect of another country, not of us, obviously. But because of that alliance, I'm trying to work out whether you think, because of the relationship we have with Indonesia, that they should inform us even about requests, even if they plan to reject them, so we know.
I suppose what I'm trying to say is this. There is a whole lot of information that obviously our country has that can't be shared in the public domain, and really, we should not talk about it, and I'm not going to ventilate through the media, and that is actually in the national interest. There is a conversation that we have with each of the countries that we deal with around the world, in this case Indonesia, that is also appropriate at a level to happen in a confidential way, and I'm not about to ventilate that either. What I will say is this. I'm really comfortable with the way in which we have interacted with Indonesia in respect of this. I am very grateful for the assurance that I received yesterday from the Defence Minister of Indonesia in respect of this matter. It is exactly what we would want to hear. But as I say, it is not a surprise to me because it's utterly consistent with the relationship that we have built with Indonesia, which is a close and trusting one.
Do you have to now smooth things over with Indonesia as a consequence of our domestic dialogue about all of this? Has that happened? Have you reached out again?
Well, I don't think there's anything to smooth over. We have a really close relationship with Indonesia. I literally had a conversation with my counterpart less than 24 hours ago, and that was exactly the assurance I would want to have in respect of where Indonesia is at with this, and it befits a very good relationship that I have with him as I do with my former counterpart, the now President of Indonesia.
Let me broaden it out then, because Peter Dutton said today that the prospect of having Russia with a greater presence in our region is very real. Do you agree?
I don't accept that. And again, I think that is a very dangerous comment on the part of Peter Dutton. We are aware of Russia's presence, which has been around for a long time, and we are very aware of it, very mindful of it. We manage it, and we manage it in the context of the way in which we govern our relationships or manage our relationships with our neighbours. What matters, though, is that we build the strongest possible relationship that we can with our neighbours and with a country such as Indonesia. I mean, Indonesia is a profoundly important nation for Australia. You just need to look at the map to understand that. And it's a relationship which has never been better, which has never been more trusting, and which is going to see growing cooperation between our two defence forces, which is very much in the interest of Australia as it is in Indonesia.
Let me get in here to say this. I mean, I've looked at the Jakarta Post today. They're reporting that President Prabowo has met with the Russian Deputy Prime Minister. What do you know about that meeting? Does it concern you?
Well, no, it doesn't, because we know that Indonesia has a relationship with Russia as they've had for decades. I mean, Indonesia has been a part of the non-aligned movement for decades. That this is not a new thing that Indonesia would be engaging with Russia, and to suggest that it is it's ignorant on the part of the leader of the opposition. I mean, within the Indonesian Defence Force, for example, Indonesia operates a whole lot of Russian military kit. That is a fact of the history of Indonesia being in the non-aligned movement. But we've built a relationship with Indonesia. It is a growing defence relationship with Indonesia. It is one which is trusted. It is one where we're looking at doing more training through the Defence Cooperation Agreement that we signed with Indonesia last year. You know, we now have access to each other's bases to do more work with each other at a defence level, and that in turn is going to see more opportunities for exercising and more opportunities to operate with each other. This is all a positive, and when you look at this specific incident, the assurance that I received from my counterpart yesterday was exactly what I would want to hear, and it's exactly consistent with the relationship that we've built. So, I mean, all of this is in good order and in good shape, and is the product of considered, thoughtful, calm diplomacy over the last 3 years. And that stands in stark contrast to what Peter Dutton has to offer. Yeah,
he said today that he's sought a brief on the matter, but it's not been provided yet. Has it been provided? Do you know?
Well, I mean, we give briefs to the opposition routinely in relation to this. I'm not sure as to whether or not a brief has been provided as yet. We have been incredibly open, though, through the last 3 years in terms of the briefings that we have afforded to the opposition in relation to all of these matters, and will continue to be that. But what is absolutely clear is that when Peter Dutton yesterday asserted that the President of Indonesia had said something when he clearly had not, had made an announcement about Russia operating from Indonesia when it just hadn't happened, is shooting from the hip in the most dangerous way.
I must ask you,
it does not befit a person who is seeking to be the Prime Minister of our country.
There's a story that's broken that the Fair Work Commission has recommended pay rises of up to 30% for hundreds of thousands of low-paid workers, largely in female-dominated sectors. And it's raised the prospect of higher childcare fees for parents if the Commonwealth doesn't step in. Now, you have talked about 2 years of funding, but you're yet to share your position on funding beyond that. Will you fund this pay rise?
Well, we will work through all of that, but the Fair Work Commission has made its decision. I mean, the point I would make, though, is that what we have previously done up until now is to support wage increases for workers in the childcare area. That has been really important in terms of making sure that we've got a workforce available in that area, so that we've got people wanting to work in this area. It's also been really important in terms of getting wages wages going again in this country, and particularly, as you say, in a female-dominated industry. And it is part of why, as we talk today on this day, the gender pay gap is at its smallest point in history.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Deputy Prime Minister. Let's hear now from the opposition and go to the National Senate Leader, Bridget McKenzie. Senator, welcome.
Great to be with you, PK.
Some stories just broken, I just put to Richard Marles as well. The Fair Work Commission's decision for pay rises for low-paid female workers. But they've also said that essentially childcare fees would need to go up unless essentially the government pays for this increase. If the coalition is elected, will you pay for this increase for these female workers?
Well, PK, we'll have to look into the detail of the Fair Work Commission's decision, their reasoning behind it, the additional commentary that they always provide when they hand down a decision of this nature and this magnitude, and we'll have more to say on our response to that. We've obviously wanting to see families be able to access childcare that's affordable and that suits their individual families' needs with respect to flexibility. And for those of us out in the regions that are currently struggling with childcare droughts, we don't have the workforce nor the facilities in order for particularly women to get back into the workforce. So we'll be having more to say on childcare going forward in the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I know this story is just broken, but I suppose for families watching who are paying childcare fees, the idea that their childcare fees would go up would be alarming. The current government has paid for a 2-year increase to these wages. Philosophically, do you think the government should be stepping in to pay these high wages rather than parents getting slogged with the higher fees?
Well, again, PK, as I said, we'll have a close look and the flow-on impacts. I mean, what the worst thing to happen for Australian working families right now when they're having to get extra hours, take on second and third jobs, which the job data is actually displaying, to pay the increase in their mortgage, to pay the increase in their energy bill, insurance bill and food and the like. The last thing they need is for their childcare bill to go up. But as I said, we will be looking in closer detail to the Fair Work Commission's finding and have more to say on that. I just want to talk
about the other story I was talking to Richard Marles about.
Yeah.
That he says he's got confirmation from the Indonesians that there won't be a Russian base. This won't happen. Shouldn't we be celebrating that as a good outcome? Because we obviously would not want that to happen.
So, PK, when we go into an election period, in a democracy like ours, the Westminster system, we don't know who's going to be the Prime Minister come May the 4th. And so the protocol when you're in caretaker position, particularly on matters of national security, is to ensure both sides are cognizant of the facts and the information they need to make an appropriate response. We have been seeking an urgent briefing from Anthony Albanese and his ministers on the reports from yesterday, and we are yet to receive that. It makes it very hard for us to respond in a way that is in our national interest without those briefings. And I would be asking, because Richard Marles's response to your very good question was appalling. He didn't know. The Defence Minister of our country did not know whether the opposition had been briefed by the Defence Force, by our security agencies, by the appropriate department. That's appalling, because we've been seeking that briefing now for a very, very long time, and it takes minutes to set up an appropriate secure system that you could brief Peter Dutton and our shadow ministry team on the conversations he may or may not have had with his Indonesian counterparts, which we now find out, thanks to afternoon briefing, happened yesterday. Please, Anthony Albanese, please, Richard Marles, do the right thing during the caretaker period and ensure the opposition is briefed on your conversations when it pertains to our national security.
Are you suggesting they're actually deliberately delaying or blocking access to this briefing?
I know it's not hard. When I was Emergency Management Minister during the last campaign, if I had to give briefings to ministers, if shadow ministers sought briefings of my department, we provided them. At the end of the day, that is the great privilege of government, and when we're in caretaker period, you need to actually facilitate the flow of information to the opposition in a timely fashion. It sounds like he had a conversation with the Indonesian counterpart that satisfied him. He's happy with the answer, I think was the direct quote. Well, Richard, if you're so happy with the answer, you won't be afraid to share a confidential security briefing with the appropriate shadow ministry and Peter Dutton. I noticed that, the Russian Defence Minister had derogatory comments to make about the Leader of the Opposition, the alternative Prime Minister, Peter Dutton. That would make two world leaders who want to see Anthony Albanese re-elected, and that would be China and Russia. Well, great pack.
Well, I mean, that's a bit much, isn't it, Bridget McKenzie? What are you suggesting? That
I'm just saying,
there's
I'm stating
a foreign
the facts.
interference in our election?
If the Defence Minister of Russia and the Chinese leader both have made very public comments that they do not want to see Peter Dutton as the Prime Minister of our country. I'm just stating the facts, PK.
OK, but what are you implying by the facts?
I'm stating them.
Yeah, but what are you implying? You're implying something. What is
There's
it?
two world leaders who don't want to see Peter Dutton become Prime Minister of our great country. That's all I'm saying. But it's Russia and China.
And what are you saying? That you're suggesting that, I mean, like, are you suggesting that Anthony Albanese is not independent and
not at all, PK.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
That's why I'm hoping he gives the opposition a briefing on this matter as soon as possible, particularly given his defence minister's just gone on the public broadcaster and told us all about a conversation he had with Indonesia yesterday, his Indonesian counterparts. We think he could have given the courtesy to the opposition to have that conversation, that briefing, prior to getting on the ABC.
Now, the opposition leader also talked about the relationship between Indonesia and Russia. Do you want the defence ties between Indonesia and Russia to be curtailed? There's a report that you think that aircraft shouldn't even visit the nation at all. Is that what you think needs to happen? Is that what you'll be calling on Indonesia to do?
We live in very, very precarious times, PK. We've just had the People's Liberation Army warships circumnavigate our country, and the Prime Minister didn't know anything about it. We needed a Virgin pilot doing the right thing by international protocols to actually alert him. That is complete negligence when it comes to what a Prime Minister should be doing. His number one job is to keep our country safe. So you've had the CCP circumnavigating our country. You've had these reports out of Indonesia, our nearest neighbour, an incredibly good and close friend of Australia. And all the opposition is seeking is an appropriate briefing so that we can be across the facts, PK.
I'm spending all my time trying to get to the bottom of the facts. Just final question to you, Senator,
sure.
and thank you for your time this afternoon. But it seems to me in this difficult time in the world where we are facing sort of headwinds I have not seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, same.
It would be good to see the government and the opposition working together, not allowing any kind of rift when it comes to foreign affairs. Is this all very helpful for Australia, these arguments?
Well, I think the Labor Party breached our long-standing bipartisan approach to foreign affairs when they went against Israel and our bipartisan position when it comes to the state of Israel on the floor of the UN following the atrocities of October 7. So the Labor Party walked away from our bipartisan approach. Now, we stand ready to fight for Team Australia, to actually stand up for our national interests. But that means investing appropriately in defence. It means standing with our allies in difficult times and not being a fair weather friend. And you cannot say that over the last nearly 3 years under Anthony Albanese, Penny Wong and Richard Marles, that Australia has been a good ally, has been a friend in need and not an equivocating friend, and hasn't invested appropriately in our Defence Force. That is just the facts. And every time this Prime Minister is faced with a national security issue, he shows weak leadership. He either doesn't know the facts, which suggests he's not interested, or he doesn't care.
Well, he says that your side...
We've seen it over and over again, PK.
He says your side is overreaching.
In front of our very
he says
eyes.
your side is overreaching and that he tries to establish the facts.
No, we've been very clear. We stand with Israel against terrorism and terrorist attacks. We have made it very clear that we are going to buy back the Port of Darwin to ensure that particularly Northern Australia is safe from issues to the north, and we've made it very clear that we are investing appropriately in defence, as we should be in these very, very difficult times, PK. I mean, I haven't seen anything in my lifetime like it either.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, mate.
And well, Independent Senator Jacqui Lambie has been critical of both major parties' housing plans announced this week, saying they haven't received, economic advice from the experts. I spoke to her a little earlier. Senator, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I noticed you're looking like some gelato here, baby. Well, you've got the yellow one and I've got the lime. Nice and sweet as they come.
Well, gelatos are very expensive in a cost of living crisis, so that also makes sense for both of us. Very expensive women. Now, the Prime Minister has accused the opposition leader of extraordinary overreach while commenting on those reports about Russia's plan to put aircraft in Indonesia. That is a plan that the Indonesian government has said is not going ahead. What have you made of the way that this issue has been handled?
Well, I think it's been overblown from the opposition leader's point of view, but certainly we need to keep an eye on it, PK. We do know that Indonesia does buy a lot of arms off Russia. I mean, it's been alerted. You never know where there's a bit of a murmur going on out there, and I'm sure if there is a bit of murmuring or chatter, as they like to keep it up there at the security level, they will be picking that up. So they'll be keeping an eye on that. But yeah, it did blow up a bit out of proportion. I just find it just bizarre. People are really doing it tough out there. So let's just keep things, they're very concerned. They're on edge. The economy's, we don't know where that's going from day to day. And I just think, it doesn't help with stability. So we just need to be really careful when we're calling out that sort of thing. It's not put the fear of hell into people. All
right. I just want to go to that. What do you mean put the fear of hell? Do you think that the response from the opposition leader contributed to that?
I just think, I'm not saying that it did, but I'm just saying that, we just need to be really careful out there. People are on holidays. We want them to enjoy their holidays. Let's just be very careful when it comes to national security issues and if we're speaking about them.
Do you worry about it having an impact on Indonesia, the way that we have, are framing these discussions?
I don't think so. I think Indonesia's come out and said there's nothing to see here. They seem to have shut that down straight away, which is very good of them. So let's just hope, PK, that there is nothing to see here in the future, and one would hope so. I think that we've been able to, really gather that friendship with them, especially over the last 20 years since East Timor, and I just think we just need to be really careful there.
Now, you and your running mate Rex Patrick last week called for a Senate inquiry into Australia's relations with the United States. Why should we have an inquiry?
Why shouldn't we not have an inquiry? Goodness me, with all the stuff that's going on. It doesn't matter if we upset them because, quite frankly, they don't care about that. But I just think it's a good way to shuffle out what does our friendship look like these days? What does the mateship look like? These are very broad terms of reference. I don't want to miss anything out. So people to put their opinion forward and just see, especially those experts, where they think, what do they think that relationship looks like in a year's time? I'm not sure how the hell we do that with Trump up there, but anyway, let's have a shot at it. But what is it? And I think right now we're going through, quite a rough patch because of what has happened with Trump there, not with the people themselves, of course. And we need to put this under a magnifying glass and just see where we sit. What does this look like? That's if you can do that with Trump there, mate. But we've got to do something. Let's have a good look at our relationship with the USA and get it out on the table once and for all. What does it look like today?
There is a trend of Australians kind of being concerned about our alliance and the direction the United States is moving in. When you are campaigning, what are you hearing from Australians? Are they raising Donald Trump? Are they concerned about Trump and the relationship?
Yeah, there's not much. There's no Trump fans down here in Tasmania, I have to be honest with you, but they're actually not sort of, it's sort of settled down in the last week or so. Obviously, it's when he goes off, when he has that, has that high peak, because he's saying, they come out and say something. Then other than that, PK, they're really just trying to get through the cost of living. So a lot with the caravans out there, they're obviously they're not flying their kids away. They're doing what they can in their caravans. They've got those caravan parks full. That's what it looks like here. I just don't know how they're going to go in the next 2 weeks campaigning. I mean, how difficult is it when really nobody wants to see your face? Let's be honest, you're on school holidays with your kids. So it's going to make it a little bit difficult out there.
That's interesting. You think that people don't want to see these leaders while they're campaigning?
Absolutely not. I mean, the last thing you want is some bloke in front of you with his bloody jacket on. A little bit easy for me because everyone knows who Jacqui Lambie is, so I can sort of just walk around a little bit easier. But seriously, when they're spending the holidays with their kids and there's an election going on, we only had one here 12 months ago. There's been other elections in other states. I think they're a little bit electioned out, some states out there. So be very interested. But trying to see your message over the next 2.5 weeks. Good luck with that.
Now, the housing announcements are the big discussion point beyond the things we've already talked about. Very different pitches, but both of the parties really focusing on first home buyers and younger people. Are you worried that the policies will inflate house prices?
Well, first of all, what bothers me is the Liberal Party probably should have got all this done about 12 months ago. They have now been in opposition for 3 years, PK, and they just don't look like they're in opposition at all, to be honest with you. They're really struggling with that. They should have had costings. They've had plenty of time to get this organised, to come out looking like a real smart outfit, and I just think they failed to do the work that needs to be done over the last 12 or 18 months to make them look like a credible opposition. So that's really, really worrying for me. Either way, doesn't matter what policies you look at, we have a tradie constraint out there. We know that much. Trying to get the building products and things like that. That is going to be straining, especially if we don't know what's going on with the US. We already know it's straining out there. That'll just cause more strain on that. And they're not looking at the other things. We would have really loved for them to pick up negative gearing and have a look at that. But I don't know what scared them in 2019. It's very different circumstances now. People's got through to people out there that 75% of those people have one house. It's 25% of the other that we have the problem with. And we're having to grandfather that. What does that look like on the table? But we've got to put more moves on the table, and that's going to take courage. And I just don't see it coming out of both of them.
What do you think of the government getting involved with building houses for first home buyers?
That always scares me. Okay.
Does it? You don't trust the government to do that?
I'm not jumping off the couch here, okay? I just think we've got to be really careful with the first home buyers, making sure they don't put themselves in too much debt, because we just don't know what's around the corner. It's great now. The unemployment rate's right down. I just can't predict, with this Trump and trade wars and that going on, I'd be just really, really careful what we're putting on offering out there, making sure that we don't enlarge these people with debt and give them false hope.
So one of the policies, of course, is that they can borrow more effectively. They only need a 5% deposit. That's Labor's policy that they announced. Do you think that puts people at risk?
Yeah, I do think it puts people at risk, and I think the economists are coming out saying the same thing. And I think, when you're not having an argument through the best economists around Australia and they're all on the same tag here, I think maybe it's about time we woke up and listened to what they are the experts, certainly not politicians. We're not experts in this area. Maybe a couple of them up there are trained economists, but most of us are not.
And are you disappointed that so many experts have kind of criticised a range of policies? I saw a piece actually today saying that this is the election where experts are basically being completely marginalised and not listened to.
Yeah, it's really frightening that, their heads are that big up there in Parliament, to be honest with you, PK, that they're not listening to the people on the outside, because quite frankly, we're not experts. We're up there to do a job, and part of that job is to listen, both to and against, and make sure you have those proper experts around you in that inner circle. And they're not doing that. I just find absolutely blatant what they're doing to the Australian people, and just doing this and just pulling the cash out of the backside. Like they've got a wand they're swinging around out there. I mean, it's not fairy dust. It's got to be repaid, all this stuff. Now, You know, each of them had 3 years, especially the last 12 months, to go out and bang with this, knowing they're going to an election. And quite frankly, I don't think any of them have put their foot on the accelerator as to start yet. As a matter of fact, I've just seen that they just seem to be putting their seatbelt on. That's about where we're at, and that's just never going to be good enough. And that's what the problem is out there, PK, and that's why people are going to the independents. They've had enough. They've had enough of the promises. I can't keep up, PK. I don't know about you, but quite honestly, I'm putting my iPad away and going, I just can't keep up with these promises. Honestly, PK, it's ridiculous.
I'm literally paid to keep up with the promises, so I'm keeping up with them, but I know what you mean. There is a lot. There is a lot.
You know, if these promises were so good, PK, why weren't we putting these promises out 12 months ago and selling them? You know, and it's not, this hasn't got to do with the trade or anything else. These are just normal promises that should have been sorted, like housing, you know. So it's just a real problem out there, but I think people have had a gutful of it.
I have to ask, are you going to watch the debate tonight?
I am going to come back and watch the debate tonight. Yes, I am. I've just got to go out and do a few things this afternoon with my jacket on the northwest coast, but I will be watching the debate. I hope we get a better debate because, quite frankly, I found them, you know, nearly comatosing, to be honest with you. They haven't been anything flash, baby. Christ almighty, it's like, what happened to the days when you had the wine, the popcorn out and you're going, oh, yeah, there's one, push.
Well,
not happening.
Well, let's see if David Spears can fire them up. Thank you for your time, Senator.
Get them fired up.
Thank you, Senator.
Good on you. Thanks so much, PK.
The Coalition has added to the rollout of its housing policy today, with Shadow Minister Michael Sukkar promising that if elected, they would clear the backlog of residential approvals within 12 months. Michael Sukkar said this would help deliver greater supply.
Hundreds of greenfield sites remain underdeveloped due to insufficient infrastructure for water, power, sewerage and roads. Our $5 billion housing infrastructure program will address this gap and accelerate shovel-ready housing. Our program will deliver 500,000 new homes more quickly using grants and concessional loans. We also know that the CFMU has driven up housing costs. In many cases, productivity in construction is down to less than 3 productive days of work a week.
Andrew Bragg is the Shadow Assistant Minister for Home Ownership and joins me now. Welcome to the program.
Okay, good afternoon.
Now, today it was announced that 100 housing development projects currently stalled because of environmental approvals, is what the Coalition argues, that you will clear that backlog. Given it's all based on environmental approvals, what does that actually mean in practice?
It's very significant, PK, and in fact, I've recently visited one of those in Springfield in Queensland, where, you know, a bird flew over a block of land in 1971 and now you can't have any housing built. And in the midst of a housing crisis, Labor's Tanya Plibersek has allowed her department to destroy new housing applications, and so we think that's wrong and we will clear the backlog.
Okay, I mean, you give an over-the-top example, but there are some real conservation. Yeah, but there are some real conservation issues in our country. We have environmental laws for a reason, don't we?
Yeah, but the laws haven't been changed. They've just been administered differently under Labor, and we need to build more houses. As you know, the government have let more than 1 million people into the country and only built 160,000 houses a year. So these ridiculous environmental approvals have really made the Australian dream out of reach for so many more people, and we've got to get the balance right here.
So when you say get the balance right, do you need to change the laws? Like, how do you just ignore the environmental laws?
No, it's not changing the laws. It's about making sure that they are administered better, and it's about making sure that we can have a reasonable basis to build houses where environmental protections are in place. And right now, there are literally major housing precincts which are not seeing new houses built for 30 years because of the administration of Tanya Plibersek's department. And that is really bad. We're living in a housing crisis which has been created by this government, and the Environmental Laws Administration is another part of that.
One of the arguments that Claire O'Neill made at today's debate, she was arguing for Labor's policy. She really criticised your super for housing policy, and she mentioned the factual information that women have less super than men. You know that to be true too, right? And that this disproportionately affects women. Isn't she onto something there, that women have to kind of raid their super at even a higher amount when they already have less money in it?
Well, firstly, how do you raid your own money?
Well, it's there for your retirement is the argument, and so then it's not there for that. That's the argument. But on the gendered element, that was the basis of my question, not the other bit. So let's focus on that bit.
Sure, I understand that, but I find it a very jarring term when people say you're raiding your own money. I mean, the core of your retirement is your house, not your super fund. Now, in Labor's nirvana, the super funds own a whole lot of houses and they rent them out to people, but we want people to own a house, not have to rent in retirement. And it doesn't matter what gender you are, that's a good idea. So we think that the super housing policy is one of the best ideas in the marketplace. And no matter what big super and Labor cook up, we think it stands on its own.
So you've got now built into the system basically this 5-year process for deducting, basically being able to reduce your tax, right, for new builds, for new home buyers. At the same time, people can negatively gear property. There seems to be a lot of different versions of being able to minimise your tax, but not everyone can. Is that really the best way to design a tax system?
Well, right now we're having an election in the context of Labor letting 1 million people into the country and presiding over a massive collapse in housing construction. So we have a very constrained market. So we're trying to get more houses built and we're trying to tilt the scales for first home buyers. And we think that incentivising the creation of new houses through the tax system is a very elegant solution. And it may not be perfect for an academic who's doing a future of the tax system review, but right now we think it does help solve Labor's housing crisis, or help solve it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because just before Senator Jacqui Lambie said that she feels like the experts aren't being listened to, and a lot of us here, and you know that, you've seen it in the media and across different outlets, not just at the ABC, across the board, all of the reporting has been critical of some of these policies as basically fueling house prices. Why not listen to the experts? Like, they spend their entire lives studying this stuff.
Well, we do, and in fact today I did a housing roundtable with Jenny Ware in the seat of Hughes, and we listened to the housing experts and people who are building houses and finding it to be largely an unviable industry in some cases, where you see builders leading the nation in insolvencies. And so we've got to make sure that building houses is viable, and supporting the supply of new houses is critical, and that's where most of our policies are. It's about the supply fund, freezing the National Construction Code, making sure that we get the houses built. That's the most important thing.
You've accused superannuation funds of pouring more than $4.4 billion into residential housing, and you've said they're spending money campaigning against Peter Dutton's super for housing policy. What's wrong with them pouring money into residential housing?
Well, because they're the world's biggest hypocrites. They're saying that it's bad for people to use their own money in super to buy a house, but they're spending billions of dollars of people's money buying houses themselves. So how can it be good and bad at the same time? I mean, the Labor Party wants to see a system of corporate landlords where super funds own houses. We are against that. We want to see individuals own houses because we think that's better for people economically, socially, psychologically.
I just want to take you to another issue, which isn't in your portfolio, but you're a politician, so I'm going to ask you anyway. This story in relation to Russian aircraft landing in Indonesia. Indonesia has told our government it won't happen. They don't want to do this, and it won't happen. Shouldn't that put an end to this?
My understanding is that we've sought clarification that that is never going to happen. And I think what you saw yesterday was Mr. Dutton asking a question about this matter. And I think it's not an unreasonable thing that people ask questions.
But he didn't just ask questions. He said that the president had, he said it on this program, so I recall it very much, that the president had confirmed these reports. The president hadn't, and the president's office hadn't. Don't you need to be more careful around these issues of international affairs and international relations?
Well, my understanding is that these are questions, and I think the Labor Party is spending so much time trying to smear Peter Dutton. They should be trying to fix the energy and the housing systems that they've buggered up. But they're showing their true colours, that the only thing they've really got to talk about is their attempted blackening of Peter Dutton's name.
Just on another issue, Bridget McKenzie told me on this program a little earlier that Russian and Chinese leaders want to see Anthony Albanese re-elected. Is that how you see it too?
Look, I think the autocracies are largely speaking working together. I think they would like to see Australia be weak, and I think that they would imagine that Labor would be the weaker of the two options, and their business is working together as autocracies to weaken democracies. That's their agenda, and I imagine that they would see Mr. Albanese as generally speaking, a weak leader.
I just want to ask you a question on, I know, a forum you did last night. I think you appeared at the Equality Australia Forum. That's an LGBTIQ advocacy organisation. You weren't the only politician. They invite politicians and talk about issues around issues for that community. I know people in the community are very worried about some of the comments your colleagues have made about particularly trans issues. What was your message to this community?
Well, the message is that all Australians are valued and that we don't support discrimination against any Australian. In relation to the issues that have been canvassed in Parliament by various politicians, there is now an inquiry through the Health Department, and that's an inquiry that we support, and we will look at the evidence that comes from that report in due course.
Okay, so your message to them was that you would try and reduce, you know, any of these wars that they see as culture wars going on in the next Parliament?
I mean, it depends exactly what you're asking, but in relation to the sporting issues, the sporting codes seem to be able to manage that themselves. They don't need legal intervention. In relation to the schooling issues, these have been canvassed for many years, as you know, and that would be subject to a lengthy process of consultation with schools and with other interested parties. But the medical issues at the moment are being canvassed through our Health Department inquiry, and we are supporting that inquiry.
Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew Bragg.
Thank you very much.
Staying with housing for the moment, during the National Press Club debate between Housing Minister Claire O'Neil and her shadow counterpart Michael Sukkar, the pair clashed over why the coalition has chosen not to set a housing building target as part of their policy.
I know through the Housing Infrastructure Program, through first home buyer mortgage deductibility, both measures which are going to deliver more housing are going to see infinitely more homes built. We have great ambitions for those programs, absolutely huge ambitions, but I'm not going to treat voters and insult their intelligence by plucking wild numbers out of nowhere, which is precisely what the government's
Okay, we're getting towards the end, so I'll just try to get a little bit more attention to the gong as it goes off towards the end of answers. It's a very much bipartisan issue there. Minister, your question.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to Michael's comments, I mean, that is the kind of low ambition, low altitude thinking that got us into this mess in the first place.
Returning to reports of Russia's request to host a military base on Indonesian soil, Foreign Minister Penny Wong was firm in her criticism of the opposition leader Peter Dutton while speaking to News Breakfast earlier this morning, accusing him of a fabrication.
We've seen what he said to the Pacific when he made a joke about climate change when Pacific leaders were in Australia. I mean, and then we have him fabricating a statement from the President of Indonesia in order to make a political point. It is an extraordinary thing for a man who wants to be Prime Minister to do. It shows how reckless he is. National security is not a political game.
So this has been a really big story today, and of course if you were watching Afternoon Briefing yesterday you would have seen that I interviewed the opposition leader Peter Dutton, who'd already spoken publicly about this issue but really went a little further on the program and doubled down today as well. So I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect this may be a theme of tonight's debate. David Spears hosting the ABC free-to-air debate at 8 p.m. tonight, where he will ask the opposition leader and the Prime Minister questions. He has not even told his own colleagues about the questions, so I don't know what they are, but I suspect this huge issue around how we manage these international issues will come up. Let's bring in my political panel for today to figure out what's going on. Ryan Liddell is a former head of communications for former Labor leader Bill Shorten. Ian Hankey is a former advisor to John Howard's Liberal government. Welcome to both of you.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, Peter Dutton has really been the main story today, and what he said about the Indonesian president or his office confirming what appears not to actually be the case because Indonesia has ruled it out. Just give me a sense first, Ryan, of how you see this at the moment. The government saying they've confirmed that Indonesia won't do this. We don't know if a request was made. The government says that that's not something they plan to ventilate.
Oh, PK, I think this was an absolute howler. Like, you can't put words into the mouths of a president of one of our close allies and expect to be taken seriously. And I think there's a couple of things that goes to. One, it makes it more difficult for Peter Dutton to be taken seriously on national security and foreign policy. Secondly, it feeds into the government's narrative, which you've probably been seeing growing over the past sort of few days, that, you know, Peter Dutton's sort of fast and reckless and loose. You'll see more and more ministers sort of talking about that as sort of days go by in this campaign. And I guess it's a bit of a sign of the fact that, you know, when things aren't going particularly well in a campaign, you know, you're swinging this river, any sort of log sort of goes past, you sort of grab onto it, and sometimes you shoot from the hip without knowing all the facts there. And I think there'll be a few people around the table in coalition headquarters this morning sort of shaking their heads going, oh, gee, we got that wrong. We went a little bit too quickly on that.
Yeah, Ian, you've been around, you've seen how these issues play out during campaigns. Do you think Peter Dutton overreached yesterday?
Look, it's only Peter Dutton really understands that himself. I note this morning in The Australian, Peter Jennings was actually writing there'll be a lot of diplomatic and intelligence gathering that had been going on about this. And I suspect with most of these things, they don't just come out of nowhere. So I'm sure there'd been some sort of probably discussions going on, how serious they were, I don't know. This came out of the independent Janes, who are a very reputable company when it comes to this sort of intelligence. So look, Peter probably jumped on a bit early. I don't think there's much debate about that at the moment. But at the time yesterday, it was probably reasonable to ask the questions. But obviously, as Paul Keating used to say, you know, the dogs may bark, but the caravan has moved on this, and I don't think it's going to continue on for very much longer, except on programs like this.
Well, that's my bread and butter, talking about the don't you take my bread and butter away. I know you don't. But Ryan, is it just going to go away? I mean, there's a leaders' debate at 8 o'clock tonight on the ABC. I suppose that's its next opportunity to be raised.
I suspect it may feature fairly prominently in tonight's debate, PK, both from David Spears, but as well as from the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. And I guess it's, you know, Peter Dutton likes to sort of throw a few sort of haymakers, saying the PM sort of weak on something like this. It's inarguable that relationships with our sort of close allies across the Indo-Pacific, Indonesia, even to China, etc., have been improved under the tenure of this government. So I think the PM might see it as a strong suit for him to talk about.
So,
on that,
Ian, yeah?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just on that, look, I have no doubt David Spears will quiz the leaders about this. But is it the main issue of the day? Is it really what the electors and voters want to talk about? No, it's not. Because the leaders have been actually talking about key issues today and over the past few days, ever since the launch. Housing, cost of living, fuel. These are the issues that are actually going to dominate in the next coming days. And that's what the leaders are going to really want to talk about. This is an event, but it will move on. Because next Tuesday, we have pre-poll starting. And the leaders are going to want to focus on what is relevant to the electors and what's going to make them change their mind one way or another. And that's what I think the real issue is about, not this bit of a sidebar story at this moment. As important as it was, don't get me wrong.
I want to talk about tonight's debate and expectations and all of the stuff journalists and experts like you've worked in politics like to talk about. But it is an important debate, not just because it's on the ABC and we are welcoming the entire nation to watch it for free, which is what we do here, but also because of the time it's coming in. Before pre-poll, before the Easter break, Peter Dutton's campaign has, according to a lot of experts, lost a bit of momentum. Ryan, tell me about the expectations on both of these leaders for tonight.
Oh, I think it's a real opportunity for Peter Dutton to sort of reset and reshape how his campaign's gone. I mean, some people would argue that debates don't necessarily play a huge role in campaigns, but by gosh, if they go wrong, they certainly do, as we saw, you know, with Biden and Trump last year. So I think it is an opportunity for Dutton. I think the metric, it'd be interesting to see how he sort of handles it. Obviously, it's a different forum. Last week's debate on pay-per-view Sky News is a People's Forum, and so there's a bit of the politicians, leaders involved in that tend not to sort of be as aggressive because they're answering sort of questions for the punters. Something like tonight, where you've got, you know, David Spears and both the leaders, just the three of them in the room, it may be a little bit more aggressive, and there might be a temptation from Peter Dutton to sort of reach into his knapsack and pull the club out and go after the PM. Now, I guess the problem, as you know better than most, PK, is that aggression on TV comes across multiplied by factors of 100 or 1,000 to the viewer at home. So I guess that's the sort of thing that Peter Dutton will be thinking about as he sort of heads into tonight's debate, whether to sort of go hard or go home.
Ryan, I would not know that at all. I would never know about that. Yeah, it's true. Impressions matter. I wonder how you think about that, Ian, because it's true. He obviously wants to score some points against Albanese, but he has to appear likeable and electable as well, right?
Well, that's because Peter is likeable and he is electable as well. The issue with this.
The electable thing, absolutely. I think that's a silly concept, the idea that some people are not electable, absolutely.
Can I just point out with these debates, which they're not, they're sort of like more of a media interview, a one-on-two media interview. They actually very rarely, I've done a lot of study into this, but when I was working at the Liberal Party, they rarely ever change the outcome of an election. What they do is actually give a fillip to your own side. And if the leaders present competently, professionally, and appear to be on top of their subjects, then they actually come out okay. But unless there is a massive own goal, it changes nothing. All this is as part of the circus of the campaign. By itself, it's not going to make a jot of difference. All it is an opportunity to actually present your wares. And if you do that in a competent and efficient manner, well, it's going to be fine. The only way you'd go badly and you lose votes, and it's the votes from your own side, is if you really stuff up. You're not going to change a vote from the other side. Ryan's team is not going to suddenly say, good heavens, Peter Dutton, what a fantastic leader. I'm going to change my vote. It just doesn't happen. So I think I wrote last week, there'll be a lot of sound and fury following the debate. Won't make a jot of difference. Yeah, but it'll give a fillip to your own side.
It does have a psychological impact, though. You're right, on campaigns. I've seen that happen. But Ryan, I suppose a trickier question for you, and you've been there before, my friend. I don't want to take you back to the dark days, but is Labor at risk of possibly becoming overconfident as well? You get to a point and polls say something and there is a sort of vibe shift. Is that dangerous territory for Labor?
I love the way you say you don't want to take me back to the dark days and then take me straight back there, PK.
That's the sort of person I am.
I think there's a recognition within Labor that they're running a better campaign than Peter Dutton, but there's also recognition that 6-8 weeks ago the way things were looking were very different, right? And so by design and by circumstance, things have changed, and I don't think anyone's been complacent about things. People are fighting super hard here. People still have memories, myself included, scar tissue back from 2019. They also know how hard 2022 was. That was a difficult campaign for the Labor Party to get there. So they're taking one day at a time. Every day they feel like they're sort of getting ahead, but that's a really positive thing. But you know, it's still a long way to go, only halfway through the campaign as of yesterday. So, you know, to your point earlier, pre-poll starts on Tuesday next week. We are at the sort of the other side of the back half of the campaign. But, you know, there's still a long way to go and anything can happen from here.
Oh, for sure. Well, thank you to both of you. I'm out of time, but always great to talk to both of you. Have a great debate night. Like, you know, get some popcorn, go crazy.
Have a glass of red while I'm watching.
I want you to enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, PK.
Thank you. And that's afternoon briefing for today. Stay with us here on the ABC News channel. Joe O'Brien is up next with today's top stories, and a reminder to catch the Leaders debate hosted by David Spears in the ABC's Parramatta studios from 8 p.m. tonight. I'll join you again for an Insiders special right afterwards, picking apart those pivotal moments of that debate, what it meant. You've got Jacob Grieber, you've got Mel Clark, Karen Middleton all joining me on the actual Insiders couch, where we'll analyse what happened in the debate, the key moments, what it means for their campaigns. So, big night on ABC TV. I hope you can join us a little later. Have a terrific evening and make sure you get lots of popcorn. See ya.